welcome to the very first episode of Where Do You Feel That in Your Body? My name is Lisa and I'm your host today, and I have a very exciting day ahead of us as we are meeting with three of the most incredible women that I know to talk about practicum, the practicum experience, finding a practicum in your graduate school program. Just a disclaimer, this is just our personal experience. This is not to serve as a guide for you to follow, nor will it guarantee your ability to find a placement and have a successful practicum placement experience. But I do think that it is valuable for you to maybe hear some other experiences in hopes that it gives you some help and some support. So maybe before we begin, I would just love to introduce you to these three women. And maybe if you guys just want to go ahead and start and let the listeners know who they're meeting with today.
Well, I'll start. Thanks, Lisa, for having us here. I'm super excited to be here to share my experience. My name is Thalita. I just graduated in December, and right now I'm taking the extra classes I need for CAP and waiting for my CCC designation from CCPA.
Thank you, Thalita. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Next, I'm Mackenzie. I also just graduated with my master's in December. I'm 26, if anyone's interested. Did my undergrad in psych at the University of Calgary, and have always been very passionate about mental health and psychology. So knew this was kind of my path, and I applied for my credential review for CAP in January. And a month later, got my credentials accepted by CAP, which was very exciting. So now I am just studying for the EPPP, as kind of my decision was to try and get that out of the way first, or at least as soon as possible. And also looking for a supervisor and a place where I can complete my provisional.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Congratulations again on your credential review being accepted.
Yeah, and I'll jump in next. I'm Tricia, and I also graduated in December with my master's. I'm currently a Canadian certified counselor with CCPA, and also I'm in the process of applying for my credentials to be reviewed with CAP. Currently working in private practice as I wait for those credentials to get approved, and yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's awesome. Thank you, Tricia. So I think maybe what might be important for people to understand, especially students, is thinking about finding a practicum placement. And I know the three of us, we all went to the same university, and the requirement there is to find your own placement, which for me, and I'm sure a lot of people, kind of brings on a lot of stress and anxiety and uncertainty. And I'm just curious, maybe to learn a little bit about what that experience was like for each of you.
I think my experience was a little bit different from everybody else because first off, it's hard to find a practical placement, and we are all in Alberta right now. But I've seen other students saying that it can be hard anywhere in Canada because we have many students and not many practical placements. For me, I knew where I want to do my practicum. And when I applied, I actually only applied for one place. And then I went on vacation, and I got my interview while I was on vacation. And 2 days later, I got the email that I got accepted. But it was something that I started thinking, I think, after 6 months I was in the program. And then I would start looking for places I would like to do my practicum, what I would like to learn. But I say that my experience was different because I see many students applying for many places, and I was like, well, I'm gonna try the place I want, and if that doesn't work, then I'll apply for other places.
Well, I think that's an interesting point because I do also see a lot of students, hearing the narrative that it's really, really hard and it's very competitive and people panic and they're throwing out applications like 9 months before practicum starts and they don't hear back for a while and thinking that they're not going to get one and typically kind of a lot of people end up getting one. But I'm
Mhm.
curious to know why or how you came across figuring out that you only wanted this one placement. Like what was your decision process in that?
My decision was that I know this placement, I would do many, many hours. I would see different types of clients, and I knew I was going to be able to complete my hours. So it was a mix of what I want for my career and is this placement going to be good enough not only for my career to give me experience, to see different clients, but also to fulfill the requirements I needed for my practicum. For example, supervisor, hours, am I going to get enough clients? So it was a mix.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I did notice that, your school does have hour requirements. Obviously went to the same school, so mine was the same. I heard some students, trying to get a placement at private practice and partway through didn't end up having, enough hours because the practice was a little bit smaller.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Any of you feel that like stress and anxiety of trying to find a placement, or did it kind of run as maybe smoothly as Talita's did, where she got the one that she wanted?
I was pretty much freaking out on my end. I originally thought I would want to do private practice, um, which in the grand scheme of things still interested, but I probably applied to 20 different private practices in my area starting 9 months out and got denied by all of them, or they said, we'll get back to you and never did. Keeping in mind that these places and often private practices for practicum, students, they only have like 1 or 2 slots available. So if you don't have connections with people already, which I encourage you to do now, make connections with people, try and figure out how to get at least a bit of a foot in the door already. Um, but yeah, I had a hard time. I was stressing. I knew about um, bigger agencies in the city, but I thought kind of more an intimate place would be nice for me. And then kind of realized the, for me, imposter syndrome became so real so fast. And I really hope all of you don't have to experience it too strongly, but be aware and be prepared that it's probably gonna be something you'll have to go through. And being surrounded by people who, or I guess a team of people who've been through this before, who kind of know how to take on practicum students, lots of training and lots of resources that you can use that can kind of help you feel supported and guided as needed was so helpful for me. So I am very pleased with the site that I ended up at, and kind of a bigger agency like that. But yeah, it's with our program that we have to pick our practicum site and find our own practicum site. Yes, it's hard, but another side of it is that you get to be picky. You're not placed somewhere, you get to choose. So do your research. This is your 8 months or however long your practicum is to like be prepared and learn everything you can until you face like the real world. So be picky, figure out exactly what you want. Find if you're interested in addictions, find somewhere that's going to offer you experience with clients with addictions. So yeah, do lots of research, start early,
Mhm.
and don't be discouraged if you don't get accepted because there's a lot of options.
Yeah, I think that's actually such a valuable point, and probably not a way that when you're in it, you can take a step back and think about that. Because again, there's this panic of like, I'll take whatever one accepts me. And really it's a huge commitment. It's for us, it was 8 months of our life. And it was a hard process, which maybe we'll get into more later, but I think that's a really valuable point of you can be picky and you probably should be picky, especially in the beginning. Maybe when time's running out and your options become more limited, it could be different, but I think that's a really good point to make.
Yeah, my experience was pretty similar to Mackenzie's, where I started off looking 9 months out from my practicum, and I thought the whole experience was both exciting but also overwhelming. I think exciting because like in my undergrad I did a lot of practicum experiences, and that's part of what made me go into the program that I went to, the school that I went to, was because it would give me that practical experience. And so stepping into the search for practicum was just that one reminder, right, that we were close to the end, that after practicum is graduation, so now we actually get to do some of the work we've been studying for. And so that process, that part was really exciting to jump into, but then it got really overwhelming really quickly when you now have to actually look for a placement. And so I kind of started with, our school had a website dedicated to practicum. So I really started there in my search, looking up what sites they had listed that were available. And that's where I would find a site, whether it was a private practice or an organization. I would follow the link and go to the website. And there I would kind of look at the team or the about us information, looked at also what kind of concerns they worked with and everything. And so that really helped me figure out where I wanted to go, and which places to apply to. Probably like Mackenzie, I probably applied to 20 to 30 places, but didn't really hear back until maybe closer to the the 3 month mark where it was like coming down to the wire. And similar, like there's that pressure of like I need to find a placement right away. And so there is that temptation to like see if someone offers you a place and accept it. And I was almost in that situation where I almost accepted one where it was out of coming down to the wire, but I'm glad I waited until I was offered the other placement, and so had opportunity to have choice in that. But yeah, I think start early, because I think a lot of people think that people won't accept, but I've heard people have experiences of even asking a year out, and places being willing to wait till then.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, one thing to maybe that helped ease my mind is that understanding, at least for the program we were in, and I don't know about other universities, but if we didn't find a placement, it didn't mean that we didn't graduate. It just meant that we were now delayed in graduation, which in the moment feels terrible, but in the grand scheme of everything might not be, it's not the worst option that could happen or the worst outcome. It just really sucks in the moment for sure. But I think that's something I try to keep in my mind is, if I don't find something or I don't get accepted somewhere, maybe eventually I will, and I will still graduate. It just might be delayed.
Hmm.
I think that's important, Lisa, to say that, especially because for me at least, while I was in the program, I really want to graduate on time and be with everybody else. I didn't want to be delayed. And it's hard if you just accept any position when you start applying. I'm just going to apply anywhere and I'll get a position. Wait, because I've heard not so good experiences from other students from placements. For example, the person is saying it's 8 o'clock and they are by themselves in the agency, or, oh, my supervisor is not as nice as they seem like during the interview, or even I don't have enough clients. So I think the practical experience is very important because for most of us, at least, we are starting our career. And you don't want to have a negative experience while you're starting, because that's when you realize you have a negative experience. Maybe you don't want to do this anymore. And then you wasted all that time and money doing a master's degree for nothing. So be picky. I know it's hard. I think for me it would be very, very hard if I didn't get accepted what I wanted, but I would have had waited, because it's important to get the right place and the right supervisor and the right clients.
Yeah, I think considering even just like how much a difference your supervisor can make. I've heard many horror stories of supervisors um, making it really difficult for their students. And I think for us, we were super lucky with supervision, because for me, at least, I felt it was kind of this perfect balance of challenging and supportive. And I felt like my supervisor completely had my back. And I think if you kind of just take a place without realizing who your supervisor is going to be, or understanding that they've done this before and they know how to work with students, I mean, that can be a huge thing in those 8 months or however
Mhm.
long your practicum is.
100%. 100%.
So thinking about, I kind of tried to think about finding a practicum placement really similar to finding a job. And the reason that I like to was reminding myself of that through the process is I've been successful in finding a job before, and the process to this is very similar. So reminding myself that I've had that win before to take some of or some of that pressure off and made me feel a little more at ease. So for all of us, I know it was really similar to finding a job too, where you're applying, you're doing cover letters, and then there's also the interview. And I'm wondering, what are some things that you maybe wished you knew you should ask before going into these interviews, or things that you wished you maybe inquired a little bit more about?
I think one thing for me would be the hours.
Mm.
And the reason why is I had friends who did their practicum at the same place we did our practicum, and I know we would get our hours. But one thing that I didn't know is when I'm gonna get those hours. Am I gonna get these hours right from the get-go? Am I not? What happens if I don't get those hours? I think our experience was a little bit different because our placement required a little bit more hours than our school. But I know that some places, for example, if you don't get your hours in 8 months, you get to stay in the same placement, but you have to pay for a supervisor. So I think that's one of the questions I would ask.
Yeah, that's a good point. There is that. One of the things that I didn't maybe realize is that some agencies do require more hours than your school does for graduation, and reasons vary, and every agency is a little bit different, but maybe not knowing that going in, and what happens if I meet my school hours, but I don't meet the agency hours, what is my responsibility there? I think that's a good point.
Yeah, or even if what happens if I don't meet my school hours? Can I stay here?
Yeah.
Are you guys gonna charge me for a supervisor? Do I have to pay for the office that I'm using? So all these questions, because at least when I was applying, I was like, I'm gonna get my hours. Well, maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, interviews are very intimidating. They're very scary. You do have to prepare. Um, Definitely, I guess some of my interview tips, my one of my profs in school told me to think of, well, I guess going on along the similar lines of what I was talking about earlier, like be picky, choose a place that's gonna train you in what you want to be trained in and what you're interested in. Um, they're interviewing you, but you are also interviewing them. Um, and that the anxiety of the interview kind of, I guess, what's the word? Just like you forget about that when you're being interviewed, when you're getting asked 100 questions in an hour. Like it's intense, but don't forget to also ask questions about what they can offer you. Um, so I kind of wish I did that more. I was kind of interested, for example, in group therapy. Was hoping I'd get some experience with that, and later on kind of figured out that wasn't really an option at our site. Um, Getting to a lot of your supervision will be case consults and potentially even watching each other counsel your clients, which is a very vulnerable thing that you'll have to do, but of course, a great learning experience. But will you get the opportunity to watch your supervisor in the therapist role? Or people who have been in this career for longer than you be in that role. Because as we have discussed before, even the four of us, like that would have been really valuable to get to watch that more versus just kind of us trying to figure out our therapist styles, I guess. So, yeah, I guess just making sure that you're asking questions and don't be afraid to ask questions because again, this is your opportunity to set yourself up for your next steps in your professional career.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good point, is that again, you kind of go in with this like, I hope I get it because I need it, and then you kind of forget that there are things that you were also wanting out of this and out of this time, because like Thalita said, it really does kind of set you up for your career, and this first taste of it can really change how you feel about the profession and your desire to be in it going forward. And being able to have the experiences that you want is something I think you're allowed to ask for. And if the agency can't provide it, I mean, you get the choice to try to find something that will fulfill that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Come in with your list of questions as well, because as much as they want to see if you're a good fit, you also want to see if they're a good fit for you. And part of that is maybe asking about what were other students' experiences like? What did other students do after they were able to complete a practicum at that site, right? Asking those questions, of course, about fees, like will you be expected to pay out of pocket, or do they offer you that supervision? I'd also be maybe inquiring about like what training opportunities there are. Do they supply the training opportunities for you, or are those things that you're also going to have to seek out on your own? Um, and also, I think recognizing that you are also entering into a supervision agreement. And so you want to make sure that the supervisor is someone that you can really rely on and talk to, and like Lisa was saying, feel challenged by, but also with that balance of someone that's going to be empathetic and understanding of your experience as well. So maybe asking the supervisor, like, how do they manage conflict, or how do they provide feedback, um, and what that whole process would look like. And yeah, I think one more thing is also like, what opportunities do you have to connect with other people? Because I think one thing I really valued with my practicum experience was that opportunity to consult with other people and really build a network, which I think really makes or breaks your experiences. And if there's anything that I could really encourage people, it's get connected. And so maybe considering, yeah, does your site have multiple other people there? Are there other practicum students there, or other professions in the field that you can go to and ask questions about? But yeah, just don't be afraid to really write down your list and even come in with your cue card. I did that. And so I would encourage others to do the
I
same.
did too, Tricia. I had a list of questions. And when they asked me, do you have any questions? I was like, yeah, actually, I have a list. And I started reading question by question because
Yeah.
Well, I think that's good to mention, because maybe people listening to this who are afraid of that, obviously the agency was okay with you guys doing that and offered
yeah,
you placement, even though you came in with a list of questions, because I know it can be kind of intimidating to be like, am I allowed? Can I even feel that in like workplace interviews? Like, what
yeah,
questions can I ask? But I think Mackenzie made such a good point of you really are interviewing them too. And I think,
Mhm.
like preparing for that before you go in so you don't forget is a really great tip.
Yeah, yeah. I always do that in all my job interviews. I always have questions. And I think also having questions show that you are interested in that place, right? Because if I'm interviewing someone and they have no questions for me, like, do they really want to work for me or with me? So don't be afraid. I totally agree with what Mackenzie said. We are interviewing them as well.
Yeah. And I think even for me, thinking about things that maybe I wish I had asked, one of them might be thinking about if they offer training and assessments. That's really a big one that a lot of psychologists and therapists want to be trained in at some point, for a variety of reasons. And some agencies don't do assessments, some do them, but they don't offer training in that. Some are more than willing. And I think that's something that could be really, really valuable if that's something that you value greatly is assessments. And I also think one thing that really surprised me is learning from other students at variety of agencies is that sometimes getting a reference at the end can be a little bit tricky, which is very surprising to me because I always assumed, I do a good job, I put in the work. One of the perks that comes with doing a practicum is one, graduating, and two, getting references for jobs or regulatory bodies, things like that. But lots of agencies maybe have different requirements or aren't comfortable, et cetera, et cetera. And I think being able to ask before you are 6 months in and realize that you might not get one, it could be a good point to bring up in your interview.
Yeah, and Lisa, you said asking about assessments, but I was also gonna say like that back to um, even asking if you're able to shadow in different areas, right? I think Mackenzie mentioned if you'll be able to see your supervisor's work as well, because I know for some people, I've heard their experiences of being able where the first couple weeks was watching their supervisor or joining sessions and just seeing how it went, where others it's you're thrown right into it right away. And so if you're someone that really wants to have that experience, maybe asking your site like if they allow that for you to watch for the first couple weeks, or are you going to be spending the first couple of weeks reading through their training manuals or their policies and stuff first before you actually start the work.
Yeah, Tricia, that's such a good point. I was actually thinking about this last night, is how lucky we were that the first 2 weeks were filled with so much training. And I mean, it was a lot, but I have also heard other students experience where they walk in on their first day, they have a couple in the waiting room ready for them to do couples therapy with, and the person or the student, sorry, didn't get really any training on agency expectations or their software that they use or things like that. And so learning, how are you going to teach me and how am I going to learn is a really important question.
It is. I had a friend messaging me and on her first day of practicum asking me about the consent form because her supervisor wasn't in the place. And then she messaged me. She was like, I have a client today. How do I write a consent form? I was like, you don't have to write one. The agent should have one. Like, didn't they show you? And she didn't know anything. So that's scary. So going back to be picky and talk to the other students who were in that place before. What was their experience? Did they get a reference letter? Did they enjoy it? Did they learn what they learned? How did they feel? Did they feel supported? Ask questions and remember that the experiences are different. So we had people who would never do their practicum at the place we did, while other people are like, yeah, I know that it's hard, but I'm doing it. So is this practicum placement right for you? Because it might be right for me, but not for you. So be aware of that because it's not an easy process, especially if you have a family, if you have kids, if you're working another job, it's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe we can start to maybe dive into what the actual practicum experience is like. And I know we kind of touched on the fact that where we did ours, they did require more hours than our school did. And I'm trying to remember, but I think the way that our school presented practicum hours in a week was like 2 days a week, maybe like 13 hours. And for me personally, it was not that. I sometimes did like 11-hour days, not seeing 11 clients in a day, but it would span over 11 hours. And the trainings and extra supervision that we were lucky enough to receive, and just like a lot of different factors at play, and my practicum experience ended up being 4 days a week. And if you're somebody who is working, or like you said, Thalita, has family and kids, is that reasonable on top of your university courses that you have to do and classes that you're taking?
Yeah, it's tough. I was doing 4 days a week too. Some weeks I was doing almost 40 hours a week. So my practicum was pretty much a full-time job. I also think that there is this side that you learn as much effort as you put in your experience too. So I think, yes, I did a lot of hours. I had like training this was not only clients. I was seeing clients, I was doing training, I was doing paperwork, I was going to consultations with the psychiatrist in our placement because our placement had a psychiatrist. So, and I was doing consultation, I was doing supervision. So it was a busy schedule. I don't know if I could have done it if I had kids. I know that Tricia was working throughout practicum and Lisa was taking classes. I tried to take extra classes during practicum. I couldn't. It was just too much for me. I was stressed out. I wasn't taking care of myself. I also get really sick during my practicum. So it can be a lot, but it's also important to set boundaries. Since the beginning, I had boundaries. I set up my boundaries. So, okay, I'm going to see clients these days of the week. Although I was doing 4 days a week, on Wednesdays, I wouldn't see any clients. Wednesdays were training, supervision, and I was done by 2 o'clock, and that was it. Friday weekends was a big no for me. Although I did do some paperwork on Friday, but because it was my fault, it was bad time management, my notes. But set boundaries. First thing, set boundaries. Make sure you have good time management. I do not have good time management. I also found out throughout practicum that I had ADHD, which tells a lot about my time management. But one thing that makes my practicum easier was that we had many students there. My group supervision was amazing. So you guys are part of my group supervision, and connect what Lisa said in the beginning, what Mackenzie said, networking, connect with people. This is a counseling and psychology is are very lonely professions. Connect with others because you're gonna go home. You cannot talk to your family about what happened. Also, sometimes they don't understand because they think you're just chatting with people, in a session or in front of the computer. It's draining. It's very draining. I think also we were very lucky with our supervisor. We had a great supervisor. Um, I had um, I had an argument with him, like our relationship. We got a rupture in our relationship that we were able to fix it. But that's another thing. When I met him, I asked him, "What is your style? What's your style of leadership? How you deal with conflict?" So I know how much I could talk to him. I know what I could say to him. So it's just trying to figure things out. It's a lot, but also was a great experience for me professionally, meeting people, sharing experiences, seeing different clients. And I think in the end, it's what's your take on the experience? You can see it, oh, it was miserable, blah, blah, blah. You know, if you want to go on the negative way, go for it. But you're not getting anything from it. So maybe change your view, you know?
Well, and I think even just for reference, like where we did our placement, we had the ability to basically set our own client hours and when we were willing to see them. There were things
Yes.
that we had to attend at certain times, such as training and supervision and consultations. But anytime we wanted to see a client, as long as it was within agency operating hours, we had that ability to
Hmm.
be, I'll see you on this day or this day is open. And I assume maybe there's agencies for practicum students where that's not the case, but I think for us, it really did provide us with the opportunity to practice those boundaries, which was something that
Yes.
was a little challenging, especially when you're worried about hours and trying to see clients and make sure that you're getting those hours. Boundaries can be a little bit difficult to establish, and I think that was one of the greatest learning experiences throughout placement is being able to practice that before,
Yes.
this is our life for the next many, many years.
Yes.
I think these can all be like full episodes, Lisa. Like just so many good topics about like, yeah, connection. Like, for me, like I'm a very introverted person. I had a very hard time with being shy. Chose a graduate program that was all online. I could do alone by myself. I was very pleased. And here I show up at this big agency where I have to um speak up and I have to lead and I have to give feedback, receive feedback. Um, it's a challenge, but again, another episode totally about how isolating this career can be if you don't speak up and make sure you're connected with people and make sure you're supported by people in this profession. Like Thalita said, like we can't just go talk about it later with our family. This client did this and then they said this. Like you have to have someone to debrief with, especially this early in learning all of the this whole world. So definitely connect. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. Another great perk about you all choosing this profession is that everyone's very nice and empathetic and caring. And that was just the greatest thing to walk into in practicum, like being isolated kind of in my graduate experience and online program, and then getting to meet and yeah, form these deep connections with people who are going through the same thing that I am. Like that might be really important to you. And I think it should be at least on your radar that is something you want to consider. Um, the boundaries concept, another huge topic. Like, wow, the I mean, I hope that you can make your own schedule and your practicum experience. That's a great skill to learn. And also, yeah, it gives you flexibility if you do have a job, if you do have kids and other responsibilities. Um, but yeah, I think just like be prepared to learn a lot about yourself, learn a lot about your weaknesses, because they will come out and they will be tested. Um, but also learn about your greatest strengths and how they come across in you in the therapist role, you making connections with colleagues, you as a mental health professional. So, um, I just told everyone around me, like every week, I feel like I'm a completely different person. And like it goes by so fast and you will change very fast. But like some of my experiences, like I got to learn how to acknowledge my strengths and validate myself. Self-care, self-care, self-care. You talk about it in school, but like, and it's annoying. It's annoying.
Visibly.
But geez, like you will learn how important it is to, yeah, set boundaries, balance, how far you can push yourself and challenge yourself, but also when you need to, yeah, know when to step back. Because I think we all got sick during the process. Like it comes out physically, it affects your sleep, it affects your eating habits when you're working 11 hours in the day. hard to find time to eat. You need to figure out how to schedule your sessions with sometimes an hour between sessions so you can do your notes and eat and feel yourself, go for a walk, like figure out what will help you remain in this profession for as long as you want to, because it, for Lisa's metaphor, it is a marathon. You cannot sprint and go hard, like you will you will fade quickly. It is hard. But if you take care of yourself and in all the ways that we've kind of talked about today and we'll continue to talk about, you will definitely succeed. So, yeah, I think just be ready to, yeah, experience that really wonderful change. And it's such an exciting time in your life. Um, yeah, I'll pass it on. But that's my experience.
Thank you, Mackenzie. I appreciate it. And I love your metaphor of it. It is true. It really is a marathon and not a sprint. And that's funny. I was thinking about it the other day about how I would describe my practicum experience metaphorically. And mine really felt like I woke up every day sprinting to a bus that I was about to catch and I just made it on. And every day it just inched me forward just a little bit to my final destination. And it was exhausting and it was really hard, but all of that work in the end, I mean, I could go on for days about how differently I view myself in a therapist role and how I like to work with clients and my theoretical orientation I align with and who I like to work with. And it's so vastly different than how I was the 8 months before I started.
Mhm. Yeah. Try it all. Like
Okay.
you be at a, or I guess choose a practicum site and be open to trying everything because you don't know what you're gonna like, what you're not gonna like. And this is the opportunity to, yeah, get supervision and support and feedback on trying everything. Um, and you'll see yourself like as you change, as you meet different clients, different people, people from all backgrounds, all experiences, you'll see how important it is to um, be educated in everything. Like you can't fit one thing to everyone. Um, so yeah, like Lisa teaching us all about narrative therapy later on. And
Right?
it changed everything for me. Now I love it, and now I can add it to my toolbox.
Yeah.
Like it's be open, teach each other, share experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Mackenzie.
Yeah, I'd have to say one thing that I feel really blessed about our experience was just how much we were able to have feedback, give each other feedback, and that importance of having supervision, but also our ability to have group supervision on top of that. Just again, those connections and having people that you can go to, but also people that you can get pretty close with that can also point out your blind spots and also remind you of when you maybe do need to take a little bit of a break for yourself. For my practicum experience, I was definitely one of the few that also had to work on top of doing this work. And had I maybe had a placement where I was maybe doing just the 2 days a week, it probably wouldn't have felt as heavy. But that's why you need to ask those questions at the start of like, what is the expectation and how many hours will I be doing? Because I did have to make quite a few sacrifices throughout, and those sacrifices looked like maybe decreasing how much time I spent socially with people outside of this work, but also decreasing hours at work. And so that was like a financial hit. And if you're a student that relies on needing to work on top of this, you want to make sure that you find a site that doesn't make you have to shift too much in all your other priorities as well. Um, so yeah, my practicum experience, I loved it because part of the reason I chose this placement was because I knew it would challenge me in a sense. And because I knew we were going to have so much training, and because it was a larger organization, being able to work with a diverse array of people and concerns, and I really appreciated having that experience because I know some other people didn't have as many opportunities as we did. And I honestly don't think that another placement would have given me as much feedback that I did get throughout practicum. And I think we're very lucky to have that in like the 8 months that we did. But also, yeah, just learning to pace yourself, knowing that it does take a lot from you, and but you also learn so much about yourself. And one thing I'd say that I really took away is learning to be flexible and adaptable, but also, yeah, setting boundaries. And that's boundaries in like every single area, those time boundaries, but also like emotionally and mental boundaries as well, of knowing when it's time to like take a step back from your work. And I would say one thing I had to learn is like maybe not putting in more effort than like maybe clients are putting into the work. And that doesn't mean to not try to find the best resources to help support your work with clients, but learning how to really meet people where they're at and not burning yourself out trying to support everyone, because if we don't take care of ourselves, then it's really hard to show up and be fully available and present for our clients. So yeah, really finding that balance and surrounding yourself again with a community that's also going to tell you, hey, what do you need? And do you need to debrief a hard session? Or can you take a break this week? Can you maybe leave those notes for like scheduled time to do those notes the next day if you really do need to take that opportunity to just decompress from a long day. But honestly, I would say practicum is a place where you have the opportunity to build those healthy habits and starting early, because it may feel slow at the start, but it will pick up. So use the time that you have in the beginning to really start building those habits.
Yeah.
Tricia, I just want to add, sorry, Lisa, I just
No,
want to add
please.
what Tricia said, because Tricia said an important thing of learn the boundaries, don't do more for the client, like meet the client where the client is. And you won't learn, I don't think we're able to learn that by ourselves. That's why I think it's so important to have a relationship with your supervisor, your group supervision, people who are surrounding you and are having the same experience. Because I was making so many, I'm gonna say mistakes, but like rookie mistakes in the beginning. I was, things that I couldn't see. But then when I was debriefing with my supervisor, or even with you guys, with other interns, or even other staff from the agency, you realize that, oh, okay, there is another way to do this, what I'm doing right now. And again, be picky about the place you choose, because supervision, super important. Like my supervisor was so amazing. At least that's the experience I had. Like he was so amazing. He showed me so many things that I could have done different. Or even times he was like, I don't understand why you did that. And then I would explain when I was coming from. And he was like, oh, okay. So have someone that is not like, you have to do this way. And even like your peers, like as Mackenzie said, we all learn from Lisa narrative therapy. Narrative therapy for me was something like, I'm never doing that, I'm a CBT person. And now I love narrative therapy. It's one of the certifications I want to get. So connect, be sure that in your placement you're going to have a good supervisor, you're going to have people to connect with, even if they are not interns. Are you going to be able to talk to your staff? Because at our practicum placement, one day I was in the kitchen, and then I met one of the directors, another counselor. We went to a room and we started discussing one of my clients' case that I was having a hard time with. And they spent like 45 minutes with me discussing that client. Is your placement going to give you this opportunity? It's important. But again, depending on what you want to learn, on your personality. Like the four of us, we really enjoy challenge. We get pretty miserable. I'm not gonna say we don't. We get miserable together, but we need a challenge. Some people, it's not their personality, it's not one of their traits to be challenged. So be aware of that too.
Yeah, and I just want to briefly just mention this for anybody listening, especially if there's people who are currently clients. The reason that we're able to discuss cases with each other and amongst the agency is because it is in the consent form and clients do have to agree to it. We don't just talk about clients without their consent. This is all very carefully done. So I just wanted to
Exactly.
mention that just before we continue. But I do agree, Thalita. I think, you know, it was a very challenging 8 months for me. I know some of you have shared that it was challenging for you too, and it was hard, and there were days that I straight up I felt miserable. But when I think back, and if somebody were to ask me, would I do this placement all over again if I know what I know now? And it's like 10,000%. And that is because, supervision was incredible with our individual and with group. Like, I mean, Mackenzie talked about it is a lonely practice. And I kind of before this would envision myself having my own practice out of my house one day and it would just be me. And that is so never happening because I need this and I learned that I needed this and how helpful it actually is. And I think um, going off of Tricia's point of flexibility is just even, we do get the chance to be picky, but kind of being open to trying things that we didn't want to try before. I know for me, I thought I would be a pregnancy related issue therapist and somebody who worked with postpartum and infertility and loss and things like that. And I left practicum being incredibly passionate about men's issues, which is so opposite than what I expected. And I think even just keeping that in the back of your mind of where you're looking is if you get a chance to do it at a community mental health organization and get to see everything, that could also be really helpful for your decision and how you're going to do this career going forward.
Mhm. I don't
Yeah,
know, one more
totally
thing that
agree.
I thought of with making connections and everything. If I guess think about what your plan is after graduation. If your plan is to continue this work, maybe again an interview question asking about does the site offer you a spot when you graduate? Or did they have suggestions on where you could go, or could they refer you to somewhere else where you can do your counseling certification after, or do your provisional? And I mean, totally depends on what your interests are, but that's something I wish I had asked in my interview and tried to find a place where when you make those connections, can you continue them when your practicum's over? So another thing to think about. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mackenzie, because I think, for me at least, that wasn't even on my mind at all. Even like throughout practicum, I wasn't even thinking what's going to happen after this. It was like I just
Yeah.
have to get through this, and then you're in a position of now you have to figure it out. And I think if you know going in what your kind of plan is, it could be really helpful. So I was just thinking maybe before we finish, I'm wondering if you can think about your very first client session and if you can remember back. I mean, for me, I don't know about you guys, and if this isn't helpful, you can just tell me. But for me, that first session is like clear as day. Like I can remember how I felt going into it, what it was like, how I felt after, and maybe comparing it to maybe your very last session that you had or your last or coming towards the end, something that was really successful, and thinking about maybe what helped you get from that first session to that last session, what changed for you, how did you view yourself both times? And I'm just be really curious to hear from you guys about what that looks like for you.
I remember how I felt. I don't remember who was my first client. I think it's a trauma response. I just blocked the first week. I do remember though that I was online. I remember that I was online with Tricia, and Tricia was calling clients, and I think her clients weren't picking up the phone. And I was like, I don't know, Tricia. That's what I remember. I might be wrong, but I remember that I was with Tricia online on Teams, and then I didn't want to call my clients, and then I sent in an email. I remember that the booking part for me was very stressful, because in our practicum placement we receive, like, we request clients intake. They would send us, like, okay, those are the files, and then we had to reach out to the clients, and then book appointments and send them assessments, and and even payments and referrals. Like, we did everything, which was a lot, but I'm grateful because now it's just like piece of cake. But that's the I remember. Training was over. Okay, now you have to call clients and book appointments. My big problem is my accent. I had a big thing with my accent, like calling people. They're gonna say, "These immigrants calling me. I don't want to see an immigrant," or something like that. This is always in the back of my mind, and I was just scared. And even for me, like, seeing my first client, I was like, "Are they even gonna like me? Like, I have no experience. I have an accent." Like, I do not remember my first clients, which is very interesting. I don't remember my first sessions, but I remember I was not confident at all. I was like, I don't think I can do this. How they just throw me to the wolves and let me see a client like that, like, for me, was shocking, because people are like, oh, yeah, I'm observing my supervisors. Oh, I'm not seeing clients until like the next month. For us, it's like, training's over, you can start calling clients right now. Like, what? So it is like my heart, my anxiety, my confidence very low. My last sessions, I remember, like, my last sessions from my last 2 weeks, they were amazing. My clients they said that they were very upset that I was leaving, but most of them, they were done treatment, and they were very, very happy to have met me, and how I changed their lives, and then I explained that process, right? Like, oh, if I see you on the street, I'm not gonna say hi because I can't. And you're like, I'm coming say hi to you. So, like, the connections you make with the clients, and people saying how you help them, it's amazing. It's amazing. So yeah, the beginning, like everything else, it's scary. When you do something for the first time, it's scary. Sometimes even the second, the third, the fourth time. But once you get used to, it's different. I'm not gonna say that when I have a new client, I'm like, I'm amazing, I'm gonna do this. It's not how it works, especially if they are seeking treatment for something you don't have much knowledge about, or it's a kind of a disorder that only psychotherapy is not enough. But yeah, even now, like, I'm not working because I decided to focus on CAP, but I feel prepared and confident that I can help people. And you know what? If I don't, I just tell them, I'm not sure what to do right now. I'm going to talk to my supervisor. And guess what? They are okay with that. They are okay. And that's it. But yeah, I even felt like telling the story, I felt the anxiety on my stomach, like from the first time, but it's worth it. It's totally worth it.
You could like see the change in your affect and your demeanor from when you're explaining how it felt to like, but then my last.
Yes.
It's so much
Yes.
more like, and that's my hope with this question is kind of showcasing, how it can feel in the beginning to what you're able to
It is
prove
scary.
to yourself.
Guys, it is scary. It is. Like, yeah. Especially because our practicum, they prepare us to ask questions like suicide questions, for example. And those questions can be scary, especially if the person says, yes, I do have suicide ideation and I had a plan or something. It can be scary. But you know what? Once you know what to do, it can be so helpful for you and for the other person. So yeah, just hanging there and confidence will come for sure.
Thanks, Thalita.
Mm.
What about you, Mac?
Oh my goodness, great question. I think just generally, please give yourself grace. Please trust this process. It is crazy. And it will 100% be night and day compared to start to finish. Um, I had a really hard time at the beginning. I also was calling clients and they were not answering, or um, my actually very first client, no-showed. And I was so ready, I was so excited, and yeah, never showed up. So there's my first session experience. So you also learn how to deal with no-shows and the kind of emotional part of that you put in the work and they didn't come, and that's not your fault at all, but sometimes the client is dealing with something that influenced their ability to come for therapy. Then my next first session was, rather than a virtual session, it was a phone call. So again, not what I expected.
Mac?
Um, but you just, again, trust the process, trust that um, each experience is gonna help you grow in different ways and help you get to that beautiful end of your practicum. But yeah, it's very hard. My tip would be to practice your delivery in the first session. Use a partner, use a friend, use a family member, just like give them a first session just to kind of figure out how you want to word it, just so it kind of comes off more naturally. We actually got the chance in our orientation to the site to practice with each other, which I think was a great idea. Um, but yeah, just practice trust in yourself as well. Like, you have done a ton of education to get you to this point. Your knowledge is there. Practice using it, practice pulling from it, and how it's gonna kind of develop in your actual therapy experience. But yeah, you got this. You know what you're doing. You know how to do this. And now it's just doing it in person with someone who is a human. Um, they understand that, and you can explain, you kind of, well, you have to explain, you're a student. Um, explain to them, like, I don't know if you're comfortable with self-disclosure, but tell them I am nervous, but I'm excited to meet you, and I'm excited to figure this out with you, and let's do this process together, because it's new for them too. Even if it's not their first time in counseling or therapy, um, it's their first time meeting you, and they're anxious as well. So trust yourself. They're a human. They're understanding the first part, but yeah, throughout, like Thalita said, the confidence really grows, and it grows rapidly because you're really um, thrown into it and get a lot of experience. So my final sessions were amazing as well, so emotional. Maybe something to prepare yourself for and space sessions out, because yeah, it's, you realize the impact that you've made on people. Sometimes they like to keep it in through your treatment process, but at the end it comes out, and they tell you how wonderful it was to meet you and how much you gave them that's going to help them in their everyday life. So um, you don't realize how special that is. I guess that's kind of why we're doing this, why we chose this. It's so meaningful and fulfilling to help people and care for people. And that's kind of the best part, is to, at the end, your clients feeling capable of moving forward with everything that you've given them. So yeah, trust the process, trust yourself. It will get better. Keep practicing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thank you, Mackenzie, for sharing that. And one thing that you and Toledo have kind of both touched on is this human side of it. And I remember when I was in the course aspect and doing skills, a class where we had to basically role play therapy in front of your professor and demonstrate skills. I remember thinking, like, I have to have an answer right away for everything that they say. I have to have something profound to add after every time that they speak. I need to know. And one thing that I really learned through practicum is how easy it is to just say, I don't know, let me find out for you. And how clients are like, okay, like none of them ever cared that you didn't have an answer right away. I think they just cared that you showed up completely authentically who you are and what you know, and that you are going to try to find out that answer for them. And I think that's one thing that I maybe wished I could have tried to take in before I started too, is sometimes just filling in the blank space with saying something is way less meaningful than taking a moment to think about it, or pulling up your computer in session to find a resource for them. So thank you both for sharing that. And Tricia, I'm so curious to hear, how it was in the beginning to the end for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll likely echo a lot of what was already said, but I think one thing that I'll go off what Mackenzie said is just like the impact that we've made on our clients, but also just remembering the impact that they've left on us as well. And just how this process really is one filled with growth, both personal and professional. And I can just remember the first sessions just being so nervous, so afraid, like earlier Megan's mentioned imposter syndrome, like it's so real that you're just worried that you're going to say the wrong thing. And I know for myself, I think when I first came into practicum, I was so concerned about um being young or looking young and people feeling like you don't have much valuable to say, and maybe you're the own insecurities that I carried going into the role of like not feeling like my training would be perceived as enough. And so just the self-doubt that I maybe had in that experience of yeah, thinking that you needed to present like super professional, have all the right things to say, but then you just end up sounding like a textbook and it's not actually authentic. And so when I think now coming down to the end, if I would do it again, I would remind myself to actually be myself and not try to be someone that I'm not, because I think what another thing I took away from this is experience is that we're not going to be the right fit for everyone, and that is okay. And there's actually so much value in finally realizing that you're going to have your areas of specialty. You still have your own personality and quirks and stuff. And some people will really align with that and others won't. But that's okay, because maybe you'll make a connection with another professional that you can refer that client to, because maybe you know that they'll click better with them. And at the end of the day, it's you want to serve in the best interest of your clients. And so sometimes that's saying, I'm sorry, but like I want to help you, but I don't think that I am the best fit for you. So let me direct you into a different direction that may be better for you. Yeah, and just as you were saying, Lisa, I think there's so much importance in recognizing that it's also okay to say, I don't know. Like there's so much power in being honest that we won't always have all the answers. But there's also so much power in the use of silence in sessions too. It's awkward because we feel like we always need to feel that space, feel the quiet, and naturally in our own lives, we probably do that when we're talking with friends and it gets awkward a little bit. But in the counseling environment, it's actually so therapeutic to actually just let it sit. And so, yeah, you'll build the confidence and it'll come to you. But I'd say don't try to be someone that you're not, because I feel like that'll come back to bite you in the behind first. So yeah, be yourself and recognize, yeah, have grace for yourself throughout this entire experience.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, that's so true. I remember my first session thinking like, all I hope is that they book again with me. Like I just hope that they return. That's my goal. And they did. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was less scary than I thought, because they want to come back. And then I think about who I was then to, my final session and how much I was able to grow and change. And a lot of that did come from practicing. I don't know, let me find out, or let me just gather my thoughts for a few moments before I respond. And continually trying things, hard conversations with clients, setting boundaries with clients, expectations, rules, trying out an intervention and them not liking it or benefiting at all, and they still come back and you can try something new, and continually having these moments showing you that it's okay to be a human being in this field too, and learning from it and seeing the benefit of your client doing much better than when they first came in.
Well, and how therapeutic is that for your client as well to see and you to model that? Like it's okay not to know, help people with perfectionism and breaking norms and expectations. Like everything that you're doing is helping your client as well. So in ways that you can, yeah, you don't even know sometimes, you don't even notice sometimes. So that's always really cool too.
Yeah,
I agree,
that's such a great
Mackenzie.
point.
Sorry, Lisa.
No, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
I was gonna add to that just even saying sorry to clients because sometimes we make assumptions. Even myself with my accent, sometimes I say something that is not right, and clients feel offended, they get offended, and it's okay to say, sorry, I made a mistake, I didn't know. That is totally okay too, because as Lisa said, we're humans, we're gonna make mistakes, and that's fine. Just be humble enough to apologize and learn from it. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it takes away too some of that pressure of like, I have to be perfect. I have to have a script. I have to deliver this intervention or this psychoeducation in a perfect way. I have to consider how they're feeling and be 100% correct in that. And the reality is that's not often the case, and that you really are learning from your clients and being able to be like, I'm so sorry that you spent the week doing that exercise and you didn't find it helpful. Let's talk about it together. Let's come up with a new plan together. And I mean, I never had a client be like, no, I'm like, I hate this and I don't want to keep doing this. It was always like, thank you. Thank you for caring enough to try something new, typically. And I think that's maybe a helpful thing for students to know going into this too, is we all are brand new to this and it is scary, but there's clients are very forgiving, I suppose. And you need to be forgiving of yourself. And like Thalita said, humble enough to accept your mistakes and apologize for them too.
Yeah. And if they give you feedback, like I hate it, try to understand, because I think feedback is also very important in this case, right? Maybe it's not the right intervention for them. Then maybe they don't like that style. Get the feedback, change, adapt, don't be afraid to receive feedback. Use it in your favor.
100%. I really want to do a whole episode on the SRS and talk about that sometime, because feedback is actually very, very, very valuable. And especially when you take the client's feedback and choose to hear it and actually change what you're doing. I mean, it's so, like Mackenzie said, it's very therapeutic, I think, for people to see that you're willing to do that and that people in their lives are maybe willing to do that if they just can practice, voicing what their needs are. That is a whole other topic. Ladies, thank you so much for doing this and being here and sharing your insights and your experience. I really, really appreciate your time. And my hope is that students in practicum or starting practicum or who are on the hunt for a practicum feel a little bit more encouraged and have a little bit more tools in their toolbox to help them through the experience.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.